Bonjour, comment vas-tu? Je ne sais pas. Nous sommes rentrés à la maison très tôt aujourd'hui.
If you have watched my first video, you know that we don't use all these things in spoken French.
Because we generally don't use inversion in order to form a question. So we wouldn't say comment vas-tu, but rather comment tu vas? Or even tu vas bien. We don't use nous, but on. So we wouldn't say nous sommes rentrés à la maison, mais on est rentré à la maison. And we don't say things like je ne sais pas, because we don't use ne pas in order to form a negation, but just pas. So we would say je sais pas, and many people would say just je sais pas. Why? Because French speakers often cut the words. French speakers cut the words. What do I mean by that? I mean that they often use contracted forms that actually don't exist in the written language, and I had said that this was the great difference between French and English, because in English you also have contracted forms, but these are, let's say, official contracted forms. For example, I'm for I am, or wanna for want to, gonna, gotta, etc. In French, we don't write these contractions. Another thing I have talked to you about is the letter E. E is the most common letter in French, and actually it's also the most common letter in English. And in French, it's as if we had too many E's and we wanted to get rid of some of them. So when you have, for example, two E's, one after the other, one of them has to fall. So that's one rule I have talked to you about. It's not an official rule, it's something I have observed, but I think it's something that will help you sound a lot more natural. So, for example, c'est ça que je voulais dire. That's what I wanted to say. Either you say c'est ça que je voulais dire, or c'est ça que je voulais dire. Right? So, que je, one of these E's has to fall. Alright? Now let me introduce a couple of new things. First of all, I know if you've noticed that when listening to native speakers, but we rarely say il. Il means he, simply he. We don't say il. In most cases, we would say I instead of il. Actually, well, we use il when il is followed by a vowel. For example, in he has, il a. Yeah, we would never say ia. But when it's followed by a consonant, very few people are going to say il. We just say I. So, for example, what is he doing? Qu'est-ce qu'il fait? You don't say qu'est-ce qu'il fait. You say qu'est-ce qu'il fait? Qu'est-ce qu'il fait? Il has become I. So that's one thing. Talking about questions like qu'est-ce qu'il fait? Let's take an example. What do you want? Qu'est-ce que tu veux? In many cases, there's one word that's going to fall, and this word is que. So instead of saying qu'est-ce que tu veux, many French speakers will say qu'est-ce tu veux? Qu'est-ce tu veux? Qu'est-ce tu veux? Another example, what have you done? Qu'est-ce que tu as fait? We will say qu'est-ce t'as fait? 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 The form il y a, which means there is or there are, often becomes ya. For example, there are many people here. Il y a beaucoup de gens ici. Il y a beaucoup de gens ici. Il y a beaucoup de gens ici. So not, we don't say il y a beaucoup de gens ici, but just il y a beaucoup de gens ici. Il y a beaucoup de gens ici. Il y a becomes ya. Things like où est-ce que tu vas, which means where are you going, will become où est-ce que tu vas. So où est-ce que becomes où est-ce que. Où est-ce que tu vas? Now, be careful with these contractions. Don't exaggerate either, because you might think, because of what I've said before, that in order to sound like a native, you have to contract everything all the time. But actually, no. The reason why we tend to cut the words in French is actually that we tend to speak very fast. And because of that, it's actually easier for us to cut the words in order to be able to keep our rhythm. See what I mean? So if you speak slowly, you don't have to contract everything. See, so keep in mind that the fact to contract the words has to do with the pace of your speech. if you're speaking very slowly and you don't know yet what you're going to say next, for example, I think that I think it's good. In French, je crois que c'est bien. When you say je crois que, since you're speaking slowly, it would be actually unnatural to contract it. It would be a bit strange to say je crois que. And I've observed that some learners of French, once they have understood this, all these contractions tend to exaggerate a little bit. So try to find the right balance. When you speak slowly, you don't have to contract everything. Don't force yourself in order to sound more like a native. It has to be natural. When you speak fast, you're going to contract things naturally when you get the thing. Now, let me talk to you about discursive signals. Discursive signals are words like, you see, so these words or expressions don't mean anything per se, but you just use them very frequently actually in the spoken language in order to sound a little bit more natural, in order to structure your thoughts, in order to sometimes fill the gaps when if you're thinking, for example, of what you're going to say next, in order to sound a little bit less awkward, in order not to keep quiet for 3 seconds before you know what you're going to say, you will say things like, I think that, so these words don't mean anything, but they just help you structure your thoughts and sound less awkward, sound more natural, sound more fluent. And of course, we also have these meaningless but very useful words in French. I'd say there are 2 main equivalents of the word well as a discursive signal in French. One of them is enfin. Enfin literally means in the end, and in the spoken language we often pronounce it fin. So we drop the first part. And I have to say that this word in French has almost become a kind of noise, because we say it all the time in a sentence. It's really like the English well. I think that it was rather good, in French it might be je pense que c'était vraiment bien, c'était pas mal quoi. Tu vois ce que je veux dire, So it's like the English well. And another equivalent of this English well in French is ben. Ben, which etymologically means well. Actually, so it's maybe the equivalent that is semantically the closest to the English well, but we use it a little bit less often. I think we almost always use it at the beginning of a sentence, to begin a sentence, and in this case it would be the equivalent of the well in English that begins a sentence and that is completely attached to it, so without a pause between the well and the sentence. I give you an example. How is it? C'était comment? Well, it was very good. Well, it was really good. Well, it was really good. In French it would be ben c'était vraiment bien. Ben c'était vraiment bien. Ben c'était vraiment bien. So this ben is like the well attached to the sentence. So we use this ben to begin a sentence. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a way to start a sentence. It really. I have told you about fin and ben. Now let me tell you about bon. Bon is not like ben. Bon is more like right in English, or all right. So it's a word you might use when you want to mark the end of something, or when you want to make people react, or to make things move. You see what I mean? So for example, you're with a group of friends, you have something very important to do, you have to work for I don't know what, and everyone is sitting around the table not saying anything, and you all seem to be waiting for something, but you don't know what, and you're in this situation and you're wondering, for God's sake, what are they waiting for? And suddenly you break the silence and you say bon. On commence, which is the equivalent of right. Shall we begin? See, so this bon is like you know, you want to make things move. You want to make people react. You might also use it in order to end a conversation. So, for example, you've been talking with a friend for like 20 minutes, and you're sort of in a hurry, and he won't let you go, you know. And at some point you say, "Bon, moi je dois y aller. Right, I'll have to go, I think. I'm sorry." Another word that we often use in the spoken language as a discursive signal is the word bref. Bref in French literally means brief. And when you say bref in French, you actually mean anyway, let's be brief. It's something you will use after you've just said something and maybe you thought it was getting a bit long. So you say bref, and then you say something which actually summarizes the main idea of what you wanted to say in fewer words. So that's when you will use the word bref. For example, I've lost my job. I have to sell my house. The neighbors want to kill me. Anyway, I'm the shit. So in French, that might be j'ai perdu mon travail, je dois vendre ma maison, mais mes voisins veulent me tuer. Enfin, bref, je suis dans la merde. Note that I've said fin, bref. You can combine these words together. I've used the fin I talked to you about earlier, combined with the word bref. So fin bref or bref means anyway, let's be brief. In short, so it's something you use in order to say that well, you think it's getting a bit long. You want to summarize the main idea, and you say what you really want to say. The last thing I want to talk to you about in this video is the word quoi. Not the word quoi meaning what that we use in order to ask questions like simply quoi meaning what, but the word quoi that we often tend to put at the end of a sentence, and which actually means actually that's a good question. It's very difficult to explain to you what it means because it's something very particular. There is no real perfect English translation for this word. But let's say that you use this quoi at the end of a sentence a little bit as you would use the word bref before saying what you want to say. So it might be translated as in short or as you see what I mean. When you say quoi after a word, it's a bit like a flag that you put on your word, and that means in short, it's this word I use, and it's this word I use. Why I use it? Because maybe I don't have any better idea. I don't want to think about it any longer. So I'm going to use this word. Or in short, that's what I wanted to say. You see what I mean? That's the way I would translate this quoi after a word. It's very difficult to explain. I think the best way to understand it is just to encounter a lot of examples in which native speakers use the word quoi at the end of a sentence. And I have to say that because of that, because it's very hard to translate, and even we native speakers of French are conscious of the fact that it's a bit weird and difficult to explain. Because of that, when a non-native speaker of French uses it, we are generally really impressed because it sounds really native, like really natural. So we're always like, whoa, he used quoi at the end of a sentence. Whoa, he speaks really good French, you know. So try to understand this, because it's if you want to sound really good and impress your friends, use this quoi at the end of a sentence. You will sound like a native. Anyway, I hope you found this video interesting. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask them in the comments. I'd be very glad to answer. If you like this video, please like it, and if you find it interesting, don't forget to subscribe to my channel.